What's up everybody, welcome to Rotor Right Workbench. I'm Let's Fly RC, and today I'm going to show you how to install AG01 Mini Gimbals into your RadioMaster Zorro. To do this, you'll need a small Phillips head screwdriver available at rotorriot.com. I like to place the radio upside down into the mold that came in the box of your Zorro radio. The first step is to remove any modules that may be attached to the rear of your radio on the module bay. In this case, I just have the module bay cover. If your radio only has the module bay cover attached, it can remain in place. Next, we need to remove the battery bay doors and the batteries from the radio. Press in on the battery bay door here and slide back to remove. Now with your Phillips head screwdriver, remove these screws. I like to use a magnet to hold the tiny screws so they don't get lost. You can magnetize the screwdriver by rubbing it on the magnet, and that will help to remove the screws. Next, we need to remove the back of the case. Be very careful when removing the back of the case. Flip the case backwards, being very careful not to damage these two cables right here. Be sure to take a couple of photos before the next steps of these cables so that you know where they go during reassembly. They are labeled, but they're not extremely intuitive. Remove these two cables, being very careful not to pull the wire out of the connector. You can use your fingernail or a tool to pry backwards on this plastic connector, being very careful not to damage the connector on the circuit board. I usually just grab the wire and pull it out, but if you do that, be very careful not to damage the connector. Now set the back of the case aside. Next, we need to remove all of the connectors off the back of the circuit board. Be very careful not to damage them when removing them, and make sure to take several photos so that you know where to put them back during reassembly. We're also going to remove the two black cables at the front, and very carefully, using your fingernail or a tool, lift up on this black retaining connector for the ribbon cable. I like to use my fingernail because it's a little bit easier to gauge the amount of force needed to lift up the connector. Once the black connector is in the vertical position, you can very gently slide out the ribbon cable, being very careful not to damage the ribbon cable. Before removing the circuit board, we need to remove the micro SD card from the micro SD card slot located here. Using your fingernail, press in on the micro SD card and remove it, and set it aside. We're also going to need to remove these two cables from the back of the board. Now that all the connectors have been removed from the circuit board, we're going to remove these screws from the back of the board. Now that all the screws and cables have been removed from the circuit board, lift up slightly on the back of the circuit board and slide it backwards towards you. Be very careful and pass the wires through the holes in the circuit board. When removing it, flip it over and remove the final cable from the back of the circuit board and set it aside. There are two plastic push buttons in the front of the case. So you don't lose them, take them out and set them aside in a safe place. Now that the circuit board is out of the way, we can remove 4 screws from each gimbal, remove the gimbal, replace it with the new one, and replace the 4 screws. Be sure to note the orientation of the gimbal and the direction that this metal bar is facing on each side, and insert it in the same direction. Just like before, take a photo of the orientation of the gimbals so that you know where to reinsert them during reassembly. Now that all 4 screws have been removed, you can remove the gimbal and replace it with a new one. If this ring pops out while removing the gimbal, be sure to note the pointed edges and line it up in the correct orientation when reinserting it. Now replace it with the AG01 Mini Gimbal. When inserting this gimbal, be sure not to pinch any of the other cables underneath, and route them back along the channel that they came out of. Reinstall the 4 screws and repeat the process on the other side. After putting the 4 screws in, double check your work to make sure that the gimbal is flush with the ring, and that the gimbal is free to move along all axes. Next, reassemble the radio in reverse order. Don't forget to reinsert your plastic momentary buttons before installing the circuit board. Before placing the circuit board in place, don't forget the plug on the bottom. Going back to the photos you took, on the left side, we have 2 cables coming up through the hole, and on the right side, there's 1 cable coming up through the hole. I'm deviating a little bit from the photos and bringing up both gimbal cables through the holes on either side of the circuit board. Being certain that all of your cables are out of the way, place the circuit board on top of these 2 screw locations and slide it forward to meet up with the momentary buttons. Pay close attention that this USB-C cable lines up with its hole. Once everything is lined up, it should lock in place pretty tight. Now reinstall the 4 screws that hold the circuit board in place. Since the ribbon cable is the most delicate, I want to insert that one first. Make sure that the black connector is still in the vertical position, and very gently slide the ribbon cable forward into its slot and press down on the black retaining clip. If done properly, giving a slight tug of the ribbon cable won't pull it out, and this edge of the ribbon cable should be horizontal to the black retaining clip. Now refer back to your photos and reinstall all of the connectors. And be very careful not to damage the pins coming out of the circuit board when reinstalling them. The next step is to reinstall the back plate of the radio. Carefully plug in the 2 battery connectors, Before placing the back plate in place, take a look around and make sure that your cables are not passing over any screw holes and that they won't be pinched during reinstallation. They should be following the same path prior to removal of the old gimbals. Be mindful of where the power cables line up when reinstalling it so that they don't pass over any screw holes. Slide the back cover back in place and reinstall the final 8 screws. Now reinstall your batteries, your battery doors, and your micro SD card. Pay close attention to the direction you insert the batteries. The positive faces this direction. When reinstalling the battery bay doors, be sure to press on all of the connection points and listen for the click. When I first got my RadioMaster Zorro, I thought there was something wrong with it because the battery bay doors kept coming off because I didn't press in on all the connecting points. Now that's locked in place properly and it won't slide off. Before you can use your new gimbals for the first time, you'll need to calibrate them. I'll have a separate video describing how to calibrate the gimbals on your RadioMaster Zorro, so keep an eye out for that video. And that's how you install AG01 Mini Gimbals into your RadioMaster Zorro. If this video was helpful, be sure to like and subscribe so you can see more videos like this. I have another video that teaches you how to adjust the gimbals on your RadioMaster Zorro, and I have a video on how to get started quickly with your RadioMaster Zorro. Look for those videos linked in the description. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Let's Fly RC, and we'll see you next time on Rotor Riot Workbench.